80 to 120 hours a week, just working overtime. And yeah, we all made really good money, but at the same time, I was looking at them like, is it worth it? Like, who are you living for? You're not living for yourself. I was telling the guys at work, like, yo, listen, I'm not going to be like you. I'm going to be traveling, doing something different than this.
Hey y'all, and welcome to Culture Cult, where we are one podcast with 197 countries to explore stories and history from. I'm your host, Marie, and this week we are doing travel stories. So that's when you send in your best travel stories to be read aloud, and we hear from guests on their favorite travel stories also. So send in your favorite travel stories to our email, culturecultshow@gmail.com. And remember to comment, rate, and subscribe to the show. Cheers and enjoy. Hey y'all, welcome back to a very special episode. We are doing travel stories today with Frankie and Alex from the very popular podcast FNA Van Life. I don't know about y'all, but I dream all day and wonder what it'd be like to live in my van and to live life on the road, and even better, be in Mexico. So welcome on, y'all.
We're excited to be here, and we think that your podcast is the best podcast. So,
what? Oh my God, thank you. What? I'm like, okay, that's really sweet. Thank you, guys. Also, who's your pup that just entered the chat?
That's Paco.
Yes, Paco.
He's the travel puppy. He's been on the road with us for 2 years now. So we've been traveling for about 3 years.
Yep.
And we picked him up maybe like 6 to 8 months into our adventure. So he's only known life with us in the van.
The only life that he knows is van life.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about Paco is that we saved Paco, but Paco actually saved us.
Oh, wait, how so?
So when we got Paco, we got a random message in a space where we had no service overnight. And we were looking for a dog. And Alex was like, hey, we got this email that this dog came back because it got returned.
I had inquired about him, and they were like, oh, sorry, he's already been adopted. And then they sent us another email that said, oh, actually, he got returned. Do you want to come and look at him still?
Yeah. So we were like, Alex says to me, hey, the dog's back at the Humane Society. You want to go look at him? And I was like, okay, let's go. So we decided to go back in. We were about to go into the Samuel H. Boardman corridor, which is this corridor that's like, I mean, it's these hills that go up and down, and it's
there's like 100-foot cliff on the one side.
Yep, runaway like truck stops. So if your brakes fail or whatever, you could go up this ramp.
Wow.
So that way you don't crash.
It's a beautiful drive. It's beautiful. But it's a very intense one.
It feels dangerous.
Yeah.
So we get Paco, we walk him around. We're like, yep, this is our dog. So we're like, you know what? Let's take him down to the beach first before we leave. Let's make sure he's comfortable before we hit the corridor. And as we're going down to the beach, all of a sudden the light comes on for our brakes, and I'm feeling, that our brake thing is getting like less brakes down, and I look underneath, and we have brake fluid spewing out of our freaking truck, and we have no e-brake. So
we never had an e-brake.
Luckily, I had extra fluid, and I was able to add fluid in. But if we would have left and we wouldn't have seen Paco, we would have lost our brakes with no e-brake on that Samuel H. Boardman corridor.
Oh my God.
We would have probably had to use one of those ramps.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's like one of those perfect storm situations. That's so scary. That's so scary. But little Paco, I can tell he's a chill dog. You can tell he's a travel dog, Oh, yeah. He's not sensitive. He's just chilling. But yeah, describe where you're at right now. Like, describe your surroundings. I heard y'all said that's a party next door.
Yeah, so we're just outside of Mexico City. We're near Pyramid of the Sun and Pyramid of the Moon. So we're going to go check that out probably on Monday.
Right now we're at this like really cute RV park. It's like all grass. It's all nicely groomed, and there's actually like a small little soccer field. Right next to us is a nice baños that has like nice hot showers that we can take whenever we want. And yeah, people are starting to flood in. And it seems like that they're having some type of Mexican van life meetup over here.
Yeah, we're going to have to go chat with some people afterwards and see what's going on and make some new friends.
Well, so that was one of my questions I had was, how do you not feel lonely on the road? How do you create that sense of community?
Yeah, well, I mean, so we have each other, which is nice. I think that it would definitely be a lot harder as a solo person. We've only really started going to, quote unquote RV parks since we got into Mexico. Okay. They're very expensive in the United States, and it's usually, a 60 plus crowd that's, they need the sewer hookups and the water hookups, and they've got these like big giant trailers, and they just tend to not really be like our kind of people. They're all lovely people, but they're just, you know, not like our peer set. So we've actually met a lot of people through the internet and Instagram and TikTok, and so you kind of become friends, you know, oh, you've got a van, we've got a van, you know, and you start following each other, and then you kind of see like, oh, we're both in Phoenix, like, let's meet up.
Also, I'll say when you are in particular cities too as well, there's like only a certain amount of places you could kind of park for free. So sometimes you'll be in like a Walmart parking lot and you'll meet a friend, or a Cracker Barrel, you know, or sometimes you'll be in like the middle of a BLM land, like Joshua Tree, for instance, and there'll be a group of other nomads out there, and then you'll just kind of walk over and be like, hey, what's up, guys? We're over here in this van. How you know, you like just start conversation, and then next thing you know, they either invite you over, or you invite them over to like hang out in the group, or you know, and that's kind of how you create this sense of community.
We've also been to a couple of like van life meetups. Oh, cool. So these are like scheduled events. You could definitely find, you know, there's probably almost one every single month if you want to drive around the country and like really, you know, I highly suggest if it's your first year on the road, like go to a couple of these meetups, because you'll meet so many people.
I will say when we first got on the road, it was maybe 5 to 10 of them a year. Now there's probably like 100 to 200 of those type of meetups a year, because everybody's making their own meetup. And, you know, so
it's just like once you start, it just keeps growing. That's what I was thinking. Like, it's just as anything in travel, like your friend group just gets more and more expansive and everything. And like, what are some stereotypes you think you can break about like living in Mexico, and what surprised you since you've been there for 3 months?
Well, we haven't been murdered. We haven't been drug trafficked. We've not been, you know, we actually haven't really been harassed by the police at all. The other day, for the very first time, we got pulled over by the police, and it was kind of silly.
And kind of our own fault, because like one thing about Mexico City is, depending on your license plate number, like the last number on your license plate determines whether or not you could drive in Mexico City.
Like there's certain days of the week that certain vehicles cannot drive
because of pollution. It's a something that if you don't know, you're gonna wind up getting stopped and They tried to get us for quite a bit of money.
They wanted 7,000 pesos, which is like $300, and we were like, no. We don't, like, I'm not paying that.
We went and looked up like what it actually cost to, and they said it could cost up to $5,000 pesos.
So, anyways, they were trying to get some money out of us. We talked them down to like 1,000, which is basically $50 US. So, whatever, we got out of it, and it's fine. And now, if you want to drive in Mexico City, make sure you just sign up for a tourist pass. Okay. So now we have the tourist pass, which was free to get if you could just navigate the website, which crashes every time that you try to use it. But so anyways, after the 100th time of trying to get it, you can get a tourist pass. Mexico in general has been so nice. The people here have been amazing. I think that people think that Mexico in the summer is going to be really hot, but if you get to like Guadalajara and Guanajuato and Mexico City, that it's really very temperate. Yeah. Right? You know?
When I went, I did not have a sweater. And I was like, wait, what? I went in August and I was like, it is cold. It's kind of chilly out there. I do want to back it up and talk about your old life. Can you tell me a moment where you were just like, oh, wow, something's got to change. Like, we got to change our lifestyle.
Yeah, for me, so van life was or travel life was my idea at first. Alex wanted to do travel life in general, but I was working as an air conditioning mechanic before I even knew Alex. And I was working with my coworkers, and I would see them struggling, always in pain or hurting. And they had family and houses, and they would work like, 80 to 120 hours a week, just working overtime for this air conditioning company. And yeah, we all made really good money, but at the same time, I was looking at them like, is it worth it? Just didn't feel fulfilled. I did it for almost a decade, and I was telling like the guys at work, like, yo, listen, I'm not gonna be like you. I'm gonna be traveling, doing something different than this, because like, yeah, it's good money, but like, who are you living for? You're not living for yourself. I would ask them like, what did you like want to do in life? And they'd be like, oh, I want to do this, or I want to do that. I want to travel to all these different places. And I'm like, have you? No. I'm like, so what's the money for? And they would say, I'm happy that's for my kids and my family, But if I knew better, I would have traveled first before because
Yeah.
I won't be able to do it now.
Yeah.
So I personally was like, my dad passed he was 53 years old. So, seeing a family member pass so early just makes you really think, life is way too short. You could always figure out a way to make money.
Yes.
So life is too short. Let's live it a different way. So yeah, I started really like turning my wheels about traveling, and I wanted to snowboard as many mountains in my life that I could. So that was my ultimate goal. And I got injured, and after I got injured, I was out of work for about 6 months, or three to 6 months. And then during that time, I actually met Alex on a dating website called Bumble.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice. I've never had any luck on those dating. I keep meeting like the weirdest people. So that's good that y'all got to meet. Yeah. And Alex, what was your moment?
Yeah, so I had also been working for about a decade as an executive assistant in New York City, and I had kind of climbed the corporate ladder in my office to like the top of the food chain. So I was, supporting the number one guy in the office, and I had, the most freedom and flexibility that I would ever have. I was making the most money. I kind of looked around and I was like, okay, like I did all the things that I was supposed to do. I graduated, I got a good job, and like I hate this. Like it was so stressful and it just didn't feel fulfilling, and I don't feel like I'm doing anything with purpose. Like feels like I'm just clocking in to clock in, and I'm good at my job, but I don't really feel like I'm making a difference in the world. And again, you look at the people who are like have been doing it an extra 10 years or 20 years, and they're all overweight and gray and tired of counting down to retirement so that they can go do something fun. And it's just like, like I don't want to sit around and wait to do something fun until I'm too old and not healthy enough to even enjoy it. And then Frankie and I met, and on our very first date was talking about, this travel that he wanted to do. And I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. And he was like, well, like you could come with me if you want. And I was like, we met 3 hours ago. It seems like probably a bad idea.
I'm just messing with you. I'm just messing with
but
you.
like, if you want to come, like you. So, 6 months later, he decided he was going to postpone his trip to save some more money. And also, things were going pretty well with us. So then I kind of presented to him, I started turning the wheels of like, okay, like what could this look like? And it had always been on my bucket list to travel in an RV across America. So I started, watching all of the YouTubers and reading all the blogs and doing all this research into like, what would that look like? And, being my business background, I put together a spreadsheet and I presented it to Frankie.
I came over. She's like, hey, come on over. I'm like, all right. So I come upstairs and she's like, I got a surprise for you. And I'm like, what could this surprise be? And she then pulls open a laptop and shows me this whole Excel spreadsheet. And I'm like, whoa. And she's like, this is everything that you need to do to save to make your dream a possibility. And I was like, who are you? I love you. Like, first. And then second, I was like, there's one thing missing. And she's like, what? And I'm like, you're not on here. And she's like, oh, I got my own. And she slides the thing over and she has her own spreadsheet. So she already knew she was coming on the trip.
Oh my God. That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. And I did actually want to talk about that too, because I genuinely want to do this, but I'm going to be transparent. Like I live in an expensive city. I'm trying to make ends meet, and so the idea of buying a van is literally not possible right now. What would you say to someone like me who's like, wants to do this? What's a general price I need to be saving up for?
I mean, the problem with that right now is the market is super inflated. Mm-hmm. So realistically, you have to find somebody who's willing to separate from their van, that's not willing to sell it for what the market seems to be selling for right now.
Or you got to think about things like an Astro van or something a little bit older, a little bit shorter, that's going to be more like a vibey van than a super comfortable stand-up live-in,
Yeah.
Or like maybe you do more of like a weekend bug out kind of thing where you get a pickup truck and you build like a camping setup out of the back,
Yeah.
Because also you could start flipping vans, which is how a lot of people kind of get into it. You buy a crappy old van, you fix it up, you sell it for double what you have in it. Then you buy like a little bit of a nicer van, then you fix it up, then you sell it, you know? So then you can kind of like, you know, test it out and camp in it and whatever, and then sell it and then get into something a little bit nicer. I think the thing about it is you have to be very single-minded focused on, you know, that van life is your goal. Because for us, we actually spent a whole year before we quit our jobs and, you know, moved out and started traveling with our only focus was like
van
saving
life.
Money for van life. And we had a goal that we both needed to save $1,000 a month cash. Plus then we also needed to save enough to build a van and, you know, convert a van. So, you know, any kind of extra stuff, like we weren't going out for lunch, we weren't buying fancy coffees, we weren't going out with friends, we weren't buying new things, we were selling everything that we owned. Because it was like, if this is not, you know, nailed down and it's not going to fit in the van, I want to turn that into $10. I want to turn that into $100, you know?
Yeah, even going as far as finding the least expensive place that you could live and living in that place.
Yeah.
You know, if it gives you like a 10-minute more commute to work, it is what it is. You know, if you're not spending extra money and you're saving that money, it's just a little bit more that goes towards that goal of wanting to live this lifestyle that you want to live. Like, it's okay to kind of go a little bit backwards to like what everybody else around you might think is going backwards, but you're actually moving forwards by, you know, downgrading to what, like, there's so many things that we don't need, that we didn't realize when we were living in a house, that we just like got rid of. And it was hard for me at first. I was so attached to all these things that meant absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And you just gotta sell them. You gotta get rid of them. One thing you could do, like something that Gary Vee does, is he goes to like garages and finds items that he could then turn around and flip for $10. Like mugs, for instance. There's mugs that sell for $50.
Yeah.
You know, like you go to a garage sale and buy 10 of them for $5 and sell all 10, you know, for $20 each.
Exactly.
You just turn around and you flip yourself, you know, $200, you know,
exactly,
and like that, you know.
How you were saying earlier, like you can always make money. And I like how you said what might seem at the moment like, oh God, I'm stepping back, like I'm losing my home, or I'm going to sell all the stuff that I paid for. It's so little versus the reward at the end. And I think I'm in that weird transition where I have gotten a little comfortable with my life in LA. I love my little house, you know, but I'm like, I'm dying to travel. So I'm going to have to go back to go forward. And I really loved how you said that. And yeah, I'm assuming you needed probably like 50 grand, assuming at least saved up for the van, you think?
Our first van we bought for $4,000 and then we put probably 10 into it.
Okay.
So we were at like 14. Okay. It was a very old van that needed a lot of mechanical work, and Frankie could do a lot of that. So that kind of helped us out, that he was the mechanical one, so that we weren't paying a garage to do it.
I think that anybody could actually do most of these things. It's all a matter of whether or not you want to get your hands dirty.
Yeah.
And you want to learn, because realistically, whether you have a new van or an old van, there's always going to be problems that occur that you're going to have to tackle. That's the thing about van life. Van life is, everybody sees like these beaches and like going places, but realistically, there's some breakdowns that happen. There's some people, all they have is breakdowns, you know? So it's all about how you're willing to tackle those issues, those problems. Yeah. And it makes you a problem solver. It really makes you become, you know, more comfortable with just anything that's going to happen. You know that you could figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's something I would really be challenged on, is the problem solving. And I think it would challenge me in all the right ways, you know, being more self-sufficient, being more independent, you know, just things like that. And I did have a few logistical questions I wanted to ask. And I wanted to say to people like listening, if you have more questions, like I don't want to make this whole podcast about logistical questions. Like you have an episode literally for that. It's episode 43. It's about the fears of van life. So I want to ask my personal logistic questions. We obviously the mechanic stuff, you know, like YouTube University, like teach yourself. I am very concerned about my van being stolen, like my home. You know, my fear is I'm going to the parking lot. I'm like, holy shit, where is it? You know, Like, is that a fear of y'all? Is that unrealistic? Or like, what is some measures you've taken?
So in 3 years on the road, I think I've never met anybody personally that had their van stolen.
Okay.
And I've maybe seen it like 2 times on Facebook where you're like, oh, that sucks.
Okay.
But I don't think that it happens that regularly.
Mm-hmm.
You could, I mean, obviously you're going to lock your vehicle whenever you leave it.
Yeah.
And you're not going to leave like your keys in your front dash.
You could also put in a switch that when you turn the switch off, they cannot start the vehicle. So you just have to find the ignition switch in your van, and then you turn that switch off. So that way nobody could ever start your vehicle. You put it in a spot where only you know where it is, and then you'll never have to worry about
That's
somebody
cool.
actually
That makes me automatically feel so much better. That switch thing.
Yeah.
I don't know why that just like really sat with me. I was like, what if someone just stole your home? But I guess like, yeah, there's precautions. And I know everyone's just going to want to know this question. Bathroom, kitchen. Y'all got the kitchen set up, right? Like you'll have like a stove, or what do y'all have for your kitchen?
Yeah, so we have a propane cooktop, so it cooks just like a gas stove.
Nice.
And then, you know, a sink with running water, a fridge that keeps everything cold, countertop to be able to prep stuff. So we cook a lot in the van. And then our toilet setup, we actually have like a compost toilet and a shower as well. And then we, you know, because we've lived in the van for a while, we didn't feel like we needed the full setup of like a stationary shower because honestly, you use it very rarely. Like, I don't know. I feel like when you live in a house, maybe you have a shower every day and like, you know, that's like normal. But when you live in a van, maybe you have a shower every couple of days.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times you'll be at a gym or you'll be at a, you know, public pool or you'll be at a campsite that has a shower. So, like, the amount of time that you actually shower inside of your van is maybe once a week, once every other week, you know? So we didn't want to commit all of the space to that.
And to answer the question about the toilet aspect, the compost toilet works great. There's no smells, no anything. Like, you could just use the bathroom. Actually, the thing that smells the most would be the urine. So, like, because it's separated. And then you'll have to like go and dump your urine.
The pee is kind of the worst part. Yeah. I don't think people don't talk enough about the pee.
Everybody's worried about the poop, where it's the pee that's much worse.
Yeah. And the pee accumulates really quickly. Yeah. Because like you don't realize how much you go to the bathroom every day. Yeah. So then, you know, you've got just like a jug full of urine that you're like, okay, well now what do I do with
And like if people are worried about like getting sick from like feces or anything like that, in the whole 3 years that we've been traveling, the only time Alex and I have been sick is now.
Yeah, COVID.
with COVID. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, whenever I go camping, I just go outside. Like, like I don't care. But before we get into our stories and stuff, I wanted y'all to tell me about a time or moment where you were like, oh my God, we did it. You know, just like maybe it could be a national park and you're just driving on this certain road and you're like, oh my God, we did it. Like, look at our life, you know? What is that moment to y'all?
I have that moment quite often, actually.
Really? Okay.
There's a lot of times I sit in the back of the van and I just look forward and I go, holy shit, we built this. And like, this is our home. And But I will say one of those first moments was pretty much on our first day. It was like a little nerve-wracking, a little scary, but we're driving to our first mountain to go snowboarding because we set off on this adventure to do 71 mountains in one season, snowboarding every epic and icon mountain that we can. So we were supposed to do both passes total. And when we were at the first, you know, we wound up pulling into a hotel parking lot and Alex was super worried. But I'm just sitting there like thinking to myself, like, wow, we're in this. Like this is it. This is it. We're on our adventure, you know?
I think for me, it took a little bit longer because you know, we had just quit our jobs and we were just like, you know, a lot of things changed all at once, you know? Yeah. And I think when we first got on the road, it felt kind of like, okay, like we're on a vacation and we'll be back at work in like a week or two, you know? And then a month has gone by and you're like, I'm never going back to that job. Like, that's pretty crazy, you know? So just the moment that I realized that like we had this freedom that you're not expected back on Monday and nobody's waiting for you to come back to your job. Real. And like, and like, I mean, it's also kind of scary because you're at a point where you're like, okay, we only have this much savings and we have no money coming in and like, how is this going to work? And, what is this going to look like, 6 months from now? But it was definitely like, shit, I'm not on vacation. Like, this is my life.
I will say too, the second time I had that feeling was in this van, in the second van, when we were in Alaska and we're sitting on this riverbed and the doors are open, and this is where we're camping for like, the next 3 days, whatever. And the doors are open in the back, and Alex is kind of sitting there, and I'm sitting in the front, just looking in the back, and there's this epic mountain range behind us and a riverbed. And Alex is just sitting there with like, the book that she wrote about van life, just sitting there. And it was just like, wow, where are we? Like, how did this even happen? It was all like a pipe dream. And then next thing you know, we're just there.
It's literally happening. Like, it's literally happening. That like gives me all the inspiration I need. Cause that's all I want. It's like, I don't need a lot. I just want to be able to be somewhere, I don't need a lot of space, but just being able to open your door and you're like, oh my God, I'm like in nature, or I'm in Mexico, or wherever you want to be. Like, that's worth everything. And you said you have a book. I didn't even know you had a book. What is it? What's that one called?
Yeah, so it's called Daydream to Dream Life. It's a guidebook about how to quit your 9-to-5 job and move into a van down by the river.
It's the perfect book for you.
Amazing. Yeah. Also send me the link. I'll put that in the show notes that way. Cause I think I literally need that book like right now in my life. And then any last tips or little advice before we go into our stories today?
I mean, I think that if you want to get in the van life, you just have to set goals, watch a bunch of things that, and or read the book that Alex wrote. And it will kind of give you an idea how to set up just what you want to do in your life to get yourself into van life.
Exactly. Awesome. And before we talk about our stories, let's take a quick break.
Circa is a brand new travel channel. It's filled with shows to help you learn how to travel this amazing world. Our guides are written and hosted by locals, with dedicated episodes about food, music, history, architecture, sports, fashion, and much, much more. Circa is a new immersive way to help you plan the perfect trip. Just search Circa. That's CERCA. New episodes will be released all the time. Circa. Love the world you live in, and we'll help you explore it.
So, yeah, a couple weeks ago, we were in Baja California in a town called Guerrero Negro, and we hadn't really planned on being there. We were actually a couple towns north of that, and for whatever, we randomly met this other couple. We were traveling with this couple, and we were all just like vibing and having a great time. So the 3 vans decided that we would head a little bit further south and like make our way into Baja California Sur.
But before we got there, we pulled up to this beach that was really beautiful, and Alex goes out on the paddleboard and is paddleboarding around, and then our other friends jump on their paddleboard and they're paddleboarding around. And then next thing you know, as we're all out there paddleboarding around together, this huge whale shark is just in the distance. Alex could see the fins.
And I was like, oh my God,
there's something next to you. And I'm like, oh, that's a whale shark. Cause I'm like, just thinking to myself, this is the place to see them. So I'm like trying to paddle towards it, and she's yelling at the other people like, there's a whale shark. And our other friend David sees it, and it's coming right at his paddleboard.
Holy crap.
Directly at him. And he's just sitting there like, oh, and he like gets down on his paddleboard and just reaches out and he touches the fin. And he's like, I touched it, and there was another big thing behind it. And I'm like, no, dude, that was one whale shark, and that was the 2 fins of the whale shark. It was wild.
Oh my God, that's my dream.
Yeah, we're having this beautiful experience, and we get back in. And
well, that night, some locals showed up, and they were having a party. Like, it was like a bunch of dudes, and it was like a family, like all the uncles, brothers, they were celebrating. One of the guys' wife had gotten pregnant, so they were just out having a tear on the beach that we happened to camp at. So they were like, you have to come party with us. So we're dancing with them. We're doing karaoke till like 2 a.m. We're like partying with them and like having a blast. And then this crazy wind shows up out of nowhere, and they call it the elephant wind of this particular bay. It's actually called the Bay of Los Angeles.
Yep.
And so we're all getting knocked by this. So we retreat back into our vans and have a terrible night's sleep because we think the van is going to like flip over from the wind being so hard. But anyways, we wake up in the morning and everything's fine. But we're like, okay, let's get out of here, because if that wind comes back tonight, that is not going to be fun. So we get to this next spot. We do like a little road trip and pick up supplies, and we're going to have a great night on this beach spot. And so we pull up to the spot where we think we're going to camp for the night, and somebody's there. So we're like, oh, okay, like we've got 3 vans and, you know, it's some local people. So like we don't want to intrude on their, you know, evening or whatever.
Yeah.
So we'll just go down the road a little bit and find somewhere else. So we go down the road and we find this other opening and we're like, okay, this is perfect. We set the vans up. And the one friends were like, oh, we're making margaritas. So they made everybody margaritas and we're hanging out in the one friend's van. And we're all, you know, cheers, like everything's great. And we're having so much fun with our new friends. And we start, you know, drinking these margaritas. And maybe like half an hour later,
I turn around and look back, and all of a sudden I see the ocean coming in at us.
Oh
I
my
see
God.
the waves starting to like come into our spot, and the water's starting to come in. And so I'm like, oh crap. I'm like, everybody, let's go. The water's coming up. So we jump out of the van and we jump into our van. I'm like, Alex, get in, get in.
meanwhile, it's already more than ankle deep. Like you
Oh,
step
shit.
down and you're like, whoa, like I'm in water.
In the matter of seconds. Like
Oh,
it
shit.
went from just barely coming in on the sand to ankle deep.
Oh
So
my
I throw the van in reverse and I try to reverse out, but I was on an angle. So when I went to reverse out, I tried to make this full turn and I got us stuck.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my
And-
God.
Yeah. And so now I'm like, oh, I'm stuck. The one van gets all the way out. The other van's like halfway out. I'm like, help, help. Like, try to help me push this out.
Yeah.
So they like come run over. They try to help us push out. We try to hook up to the other van to try to get out. They try to pull us out. They almost get stuck. So then we unlatch from them and we're like, go, get out of here. But what we don't realize is the whole time they're trying to help us, the water's actually starting to surround us.
Oh shit.
So we're on like this
So
little island.
they're on like a dry patch. We're in
Oh
a wet
my-
patch. And then they're like, okay, we're going to unhook. And we're like, don't worry about us. Just leave us behind. We'll figure it out. Get your van out of here. So he goes to drive out and the water is in front of his van.
Oh my God.
So he's still on dry ground, but it's like soaked in front of him.
What?
Yeah.
Oh.
So he goes to get out and almost immediately gets stuck. And so now he's stuck and we're stuck. And our third friend's van is in safety, thankfully.
Okay.
So now at this point, we're thinking about how do we get these 2 vans unstuck? And then I'm just like, yo, the water's coming in. We have to
We
make a
don't know
decision.
how high
we
it's
don't know
gonna
how high
go.
it's going to go. I'm like, Alex, grab our belongings, grab our passports, grab like a thing of clothes for us,
Yeah.
and let's get the fuck out of here. Let's abandon ship. And
Yeah.
as scary as that was, we knew that we had to be there for each other and for Paco and to make
Yeah.
sure that we didn't lose our lives over the van. And yeah, it would suck because we lose our whole home. We lose everything that we absolutely own. We lose, you know, our whole lives.
Yeah.
And so it was a tough decision. we
But
decided to get
honestly,
out
it
of
made
it.
you realize like what's actually important. So like, you know, we have one bag that's got, you know, the passports and some camera stuff and some dry clothes, and another bag that's got like some food for the dog and like
Yeah.
some random like sleep masks and stuff. I was like, okay, if we're gonna stay at a hotel tonight, these are the 5 things that we're gonna need.
Yeah.
And so we grab those 2 bags and we go to our friend's van, the only van that's safe at this point. And we're like, all right, well, you know, obviously we're still going to try to save the van, but we have to get out of the water and it's freezing cold. Like you think
Oh.
Mexico is going to be hot. And I feel like that's one of the, like, there's
Yeah.
definitely areas of Mexico that are really hot. And when you think of like Cancun or,
Yeah.
you know, Tulum or whatever, like it's going to be a beachy and it's going to be hot. But in Guerrero Negro, it's always like 60 degrees
It's-
and
it's the
cold and
Pacific.
windy.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
specific, yeah.
So we're freezing cold. We're soaking wet. We're, you know, upset, obviously, that our van's
Yeah.
gone. But like, we're like, okay, like we need to formulate a plan. So luckily, the one van is still safe. We all pile into that one van.
One of the luckiest parts about the whole situation is the dude David that we're getting in this van, that him and his wife are in this van. He is from Colombia originally and speaks fluent Spanish.
Oh, great. Okay.
So, because the rest of us don't. The rest of us are
Yeah.
a bunch of gringos. We have a little bit of Spanish to order
Exactly.
a meal at a restaurant, but not
Yeah.
to be like my van is sinking. We need help. You know?
And now we have a lot more than what we had then. So and we still don't have much.
Right.
So it was very un poco español for sure.
So we drive up onto the main strip, and
plan was to go to a gas station.
The plan, I was like, okay, there's a gas station that's still open. It's only open for another 20 minutes. But like, if we get over there, they'll probably know somebody in the town that can help. Yeah. So we're on our way to drive there, and this car is leaving. There was some kind of like weird car like racing place, and it's like as we're driving up, everybody's leaving this like event center or whatever. So we flag down one of the cars, and David, who speaks fluent Spanish, explains the situation to the car. And the guy's like, oh, I actually know the tow truck driver in town. Let me call him and I'll see if he can come and help you out. So he's got this tow truck driver like on speed dial. So he just calls the guy and he's like, okay, yeah, like he'll be here in a little bit. And we're like, okay, cool.
And they're like super cool and relaxed about the whole thing because they must have this situation happen quite often.
Yeah.
Because it's a salt flat area that people don't know that the tide comes in so high.
And it's like a 20-foot tide swell.
Yeah.
So it'll go from completely dry to completely underwater.
That's insane.
We actually saw a photo like a couple of weeks later of a van that was like past its windows in the water there.
Yeah. This is just after it's happened. It almost happened to us.
Tight.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So yes, and I mean it comes in quick. So they're all out there that cheers and cervezas and drinking and like we're just like trying to be involved and take ourselves
but, like, also,
out of this
we're like stressed
you know
out.
this
like,
hurtful feeling that we're having, and we're trying to like bring this positive energy back into us, you know, so that way hopefully we have a positive outcome. And so like they're like holding Paco and like playing with Paco.
They're like
taking
Facebook live streaming
with
with like these gringos that have like got their van stuck.
So basically we wind up we wait there for about an hour or so, and we're looking at the tide too because now we have service, so we pull up the tide charts and we realize that the tide is coming in another 2 more meters, which is like 6 to 9 feet of water that's still coming in over the next 2 hours. So luckily,
and it's like almost midnight at this point. Like it's like 11 p.m.
11 p.m.
It's nighttime
outside.
I don't know why that was just daytime. Oh my God.
Yeah, it was night. It was cold. It was windy. We're soaked.
We're lucky we dropped the pin on where the vans are because you couldn't even see them.
When we drove back up, we were like, where are the vans? It's pitch black. You can't see them at all.
Yeah.
The one van had left like one of their lights on. And we're like, oh, that's it right there. And the guy's like, yeah, you know how you know that that's your van? Because there's nothing out here. This is literally the ocean.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It was nuts.
It was crazy. But luckily, the tow truck team, they had like a whole bunch of people come out. All of these locals are standing out there, calf deep water, with their like cute like Friday night going out outfits on.
They were dressed to impress.
Yeah, and like everybody's just soaking wet and freezing cold and live streaming it on Facebook and like watching the whole thing happen. But so luckily the tow truck was able to get both of the vehicles out, and even more luckily there was no damage to the vehicles.
What? There was no water damage?
No, the water came up, but it didn't come up far enough to get into the van.
So what we think happened is when the water first came in, the water comes in like really hot and gets, you know, pretty high quick. But once it like crests over the salt flats area, it kind of falls into the salt flats and drops down quite
a bit.
Spreads
out.
And it spreads out instead of one. Yeah. So I mean, if we would have waited 2 more hours,
who knows?
The chances are we would have had a half-filled van with water. But luckily the chassis didn't even get wet, you know, because of the situation that happened. So yeah, the tow truck got in. They were able to hook up our vans and pull us out. They were like, another few more hours and it would have been really bad.
Oh my God. That is a crazy story. Like from the very beginning, the bliss of that day of like the whale shark and the kayak is just like, you're at the top of life. Like in the same day, you're at the top of life. Like you just did my bucket list, which is to pet a whale on a kayak. That's my literal number one thing in life, which y'all did. And then at the same time, Mother Earth flooded y'all. And just like also just no matter what, like when you're traveling, you don't know the land when you're traveling usually. So it's like to a local, they're like, what are y'all doing out there drinking margs? Like, but to y'all, you're like, wow, what a cool spot. Such a whiplash.
So here's the kicker. If we would have went to the spot where that one guy was parked,
where
we were like, we don't want to bother
park.
them, we would have been perfectly fine. But the fact
Yeah.
that we drove just a little bit further down the peninsula, just a tiny bit, like less than a mile, we drove away. We were on the same plateau of where that car was. We could see it. And the locals were like, hey, after we get you out, we're gonna go and we're gonna go hang out on this beach that we know
we're gonna
is
party
safe.
and
we'll
like
party
celebrate.
On the beach. We follow them out, and they bring us right back to that freaking spot.
The original spot. That is so funny. Oh my gosh. Also, I just love Mexicans. They're just like, and we're going to party. After all that. And the Facebook live stream, I'm so weak. And just like that alone says a lot about like the stereotype of Mexico, but versus like they're in their going out outfits and they're like in the water, like cold Pacific water, just helping y'all out in the middle of the night. They didn't have to do that at all. They could have been like, oh shit, out of luck. Y'all should have known. Like, not at all. Just when you're traveling, like people are just so kind, and they can also probably tell that you're out of your element too.
Mm-hmm.
And the luckiness of asking that one car, that we stopped to like say, hey, can you help us out? They happen to know the local tow guy. Like
oh my god,
we could have pulled over 6 cars and not got that opportunity, but yet that one car, bang, got it, perfect. We were so lucky to just. We were trying to be positive the whole time, Alex and I.
Yeah.
So like because the way we think about things is if we're positive, we'll have a positive outcome. So, we kept pushing that positive vibe and feeling as much as we could. And whenever Alex was down, I was up. Whenever I was down, Alex was up, so it was like we were definitely there for each other. Alex was definitely a rock throughout that whole situation. She was calm and collective and really knew what she was doing, or at least it seemed like she knew what she was doing. Yeah. And then, after all the emotions came out, and like if you want to see the whole thing go down, we filmed the whole thing and it's on our YouTube channel. So it was the Nightmare in Mexico, I think is what it was, correct?
Okay. I'll add that to the show notes because I just want to see the terrain and see what y'all are talking about. But I think that's really important. Stay positive. Yesterday I had a flat tire and I had to go to the tire store and I had a whole day planned out, but a flat tire. And I ended up talking to like 80 people at the tire store and I had such a good time at the tire store. And I was like, wow, like if I could have had a bad attitude and be like, oh my God, it's hot. Like I missed out my whole day. But instead, like I got to meet people and it's just, it's all about your attitude. And you did get to meet a lot of people out of that. And you kind of know next time when you travel, like if there's someone not really parked here, it's probably for a reason, Like what a whiplash.
Always a lesson.
Always a lesson.
Yeah, well, another weird part about it too is when we got out of the vehicles at the very first part, I looked at the ground and then I noticed that there were like these little holes in the marsh. Yeah. It was like a marshy looking area, and I felt the floor and I was like, it's a little wet, like. But then we were with all these other people and about to have a good time, and I was like, whatever. But I should have really went with my gut. I think the moral of the story is to always like trust your gut instinct, and like if you feel like you're in a not a great spot, you should probably move.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like I'm learning so much, like just through talking to you. I feel like y'all are very wise people. I feel like you live your life, and I don't know. I'm just like I feel like I could talk to y'all forever and hear y'all's stories. But before we wrap up, what's going on with this trip?
Yeah, so our goal right now is to do 9 countries in 9 months. We left San Diego in the beginning of May, and we're planning on being back in the United States somewhere by February so that we can do snowboard season. But basically, we want to do all of the Central American countries. So Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama. Belize to do everything and then head back to the United States and then keep traveling from there. So
that's the goal. But I think the part that we want people to realize is that we're gonna show the culture. We're gonna show the food. We're going to show our struggles along the travel. We're going to show all the good highlights about it too as well. Like it's going to be a mixture of everything. It's going to be things that you don't want to miss when you go to certain places. We get to meet really cool, kind, different people as well.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is about breaking down the stigma and the stereotypes around the Central American countries and what life is really like down here, because a lot of people told us that it was dangerous and we shouldn't come here and, don't do that. It's, it's going to be very bad for you. And we've had, nothing but really positive experiences. And we want to just share that, you don't necessarily have to be afraid to step outside your comfort zone and to explore somewhere new. The world is big. And if you spend your entire life, only exploring the United States, you've missed a lot of the world. So we're excited to, bring these 9 countries to everybody over the next 9 months and really just kind of show what life in Central America is really like.
Oh, yes. I'm super excited about that because I want to go explore that part of the world too. So I can't wait to watch that unfold. I'm covering El Salvador right now. So I would love to have you on after you go to El Salvador and talk about El Salvador. But I definitely want to have you on for more travel stories in the future because I know that's just like 1 out of a million. I'm sure y'all have. But guys, just remember to check out in the show notes the book, and we have the episodes and the y'all's podcast. Again, it's FNA Van Life. You're on Apple, you're on Spotify, all that jazz. But yeah, thank y'all for coming on today. I had so much fun. I definitely was on the edge of my seat with that story.
Had an amazing time. Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate your time and the energy that you put in. We can't wait to hear this episode.
Yes. Cheers, y'all. See y'all next time.